welcome back to the channel where we talk about video game music, sound design, and implementation. If you've been watching my channel, you've probably already heard my music for the video game Horizon Zero Dawn. The rescores, the breakdown, and the behind the scenes of how I composed it and had amazing players to make it come to life. But now, I want to show you the other half of the project that I've been working on. That being said, what if this was my actual job? What if I was given a brief for 3 months to design a prototype for the entire interactive music system, all written and implemented? Well, I'm going to show you guys my prototype that is a fully interactive built in Unity and powered by Wwise. My goal was to make music that doesn't just play in the background, it responds to the player, the world, and the gameplay flow. Before we get into this video, I want to give a huge thank you to Audiokinetic for their amazing and free courses on Wwise. And also a really big thank you to my mentors and professors at Berklee College of Music for helping me with the composition side of things. 3 months ago, I had no idea what Wwise and Unity even was, and I've only been writing interactive and media music for a year. So if you are watching this video and thinking, what the heck is she even talking about? Don't worry, I've been there and I've learned so much since then, and I'm so happy to be someone who can share this with other aspiring interactive media composers. Anyone can do it. You just have to work really hard and enjoy every process, mistakes and all, because that's how we learn. And with that little spiel, let's get straight into the video. So, for my prototype, I decided to use the game Horizon Zero Dawn as my creative reference. Not recreating the original, but imagining what my version of the music system would be if I were scoring the game. After doing a lot of research to figure out the game's style, what the music would be like, and creating my own music with such amazing musicians along the way, I finally started to wonder, how do I make this music interactive? My first thoughts were understanding what the music I wrote was for. So I decided to write 4 different states that you would find in the gameplay: exploration, stealth, a light combat state, and a boss battle. The first state I wrote for was the exploration state, and this was before I had any idea of what I wanted to do on the interactive side of it. So I had just written 1 linear track. This was quite complicated as I could just loop it, but it would be a bit obvious because I didn't write the track to be too long so that you could just loop it one time through, and there was really only one big moment to my track. So the first thing I came up was to think of my music in segments, meaning thinking from a composer's standpoint, how the form of my music was written in, which was something like A, B, B prime, B, and C. This is just an abstract form as my exploration music was very free-flowing. So I had around 5 different short pieces that worked together. I cut each of those pieces into segments and named them A through E and Ys to make it a bit more organized. In my playlist container, how it's played in the game, I thought about the form of my music and how often I wanted the player to hear certain moments. This is where the music playlist really does its magic. I knew right away that I wanted it to be very free-flowing and random at the beginning every time, so if you go away and come back to the explore state, the music will start somewhere different every single time. I put my segments of my A, B, C, and D music in a random playlist that would continue for quite some time. These were the parts in my music that were similar, but have enough differences to keep the player interested, but not give away too much. I also added a short silence track so that there wouldn't always be music playing. Once the random container played enough times, it would finally move on to the big moment of my piece, which would play in the order that I wanted it to so that it would make more musical sense and grow in the way that I wanted it to. When that finished, it would repeat the process again. So that's the overall picture, But to make it even more interactive, I added some randomized subtracks to each individual letter track. What I did here were variations on what those letters were. So I had some small motifs here that would go to the bansuri instead of the clarinet. Or maybe there would be no motif at all and just the drone would play. This grows the amount of music that you have, even if you just wrote a 2-minute piece, eventually making it a 10-minute piece. Once I started understanding how I should think in terms of interactivity, I started trying out different methods of composing my music. When it came to my stealth music, I actually wrote 4 different small pieces in total, not linearly. I also decided that I wanted my stealth music to start in a particular spot every time that you would enter stealth. Then it was kind of the same principle as my exploration music. I kept the state quite simple in implementation because it mostly has silences, so you can hear enemies when in stealth mode. Because sound effects are also an aspect of interactive audio in games. So having silence in the music is just as important. Then came the light combat state. For this one, I wanted to create one track that has an intro and then a loop. So that's it for the playlist. Where things started to get interesting were my subtracks, and I did all sorts of crazy things with it. My light combat track was based off of this conga rhythm that I had. To it, I added these voices and synth clusters. I had 2 versions of each, everything in the same mode, so using the same notes, so the clashing wouldn't be too harsh, but harsh enough so that when you add harmonization, any of them would work with variations Wwise decided to pick. I later wrote 2 techno rhythms for an interesting timbre and 2 cello lines for a more organic sound, but still keeping the quality of that orchestral hybrid sound that I was going for. So those would all play randomly or have silence. Then, to make it even more interesting, I tweak this blue line here that adds a low-pass filter effect anytime the track is selected. Keeping the same exact music I had, but just completely transforming its sound, making it sound like a totally different track while still keeping a perfect loop. So within just 3 states, I was able to apply various different methods for each, like randomization in playlists, silences, subtracks, randomization to motific timbres within those subtracks, and manipulating effects like low-pass filters. The more you try it out, the more you start to understand how you can use these implementation tricks that Wwise offers to your disposal in order to make your music more interactive. Because with all this knowledge, I was able to create my final boss state using all of the techniques that I have learned. I thought ahead about the music that I was writing, creating easy segments I could take out and randomize, and made it on a much larger scale for this state. And I think it turned out pretty cool. But now, I had to think about the next problem to solve. How do I connect each state together, and seamlessly? Well, Wwise has the transition tab that allows you to set commands from one state to another. I did think about this a bit beforehand when creating my music in terms of tempo and keys. Having similar tempos, time signatures, and modes can really help with your transitions from one musical layering system to another, but you don't always have to limit yourself to that. I wrote most of my music in the same mode, but every state is in a different tempo, so creating a musical transition that worked from one state to another is important to think about. Usually, something that's a great idea for transitions is something like a cymbal swell or maybe a timpani that slows down or speeds up so you can control the tempo that you're going into. And you can use the same principle of subtracks and effects that we used in our music in your transitions to have even more variety in your game's music. As for which transitions to do, you have to think about which states you can go into depending on the state that you're currently in. For example, all of my states can enter one another, except for my boss and my stealth state, so I won't make a transition to or from each of them. In Wwise, you can also decide when you want your transition sounds to happen. I chose for each of my sounds to happen immediately, but I had my beginning states fade out and the states that I transitioned to fade in, so the music didn't just cut off immediately, it faded in. Lastly, I added some specifics as to where in the playlist of the state I was transitioning to, like starting from segment B, so that I had more control as the composer as to what the player was listening to first. Most things in games are left to the decision of the player, but we as audio designers can choose certain things to make the overall experience more smooth and immersive if we want. Now that I showed you the complete chaos behind the magic, let me show you the simple steps that I went through to add it into my gameplay. First were states. Wwise can identify what sounds you have are states by using the Game Syncs tab and connecting each one you have to its playlist. And it will automatically understand the transitions that you have set to the states as well. And here's the magical tab, the Events tab. This tells the game what to play and when. I created a bunch of different work units to organize my sounds because I also added some ambiances and sound effects as well as the music. Here I have a play start music event, and that's basically what plays at the start of the game when you hit the play button. Inside of it, I'm telling the game to play my music level 1 and to set the state to explore. I also told it to post an event, which means to play what's inside that event. So what I have playing in that event is my ambient bird and wind sounds. And then I have a play event for each of my states, telling the game to switch the state depending on which one the player is in. Some more advanced things that I've included involve sidechain ducking of the music and ambience when you enter an underwater state versus a land state using things like RTPCs, some reverb, aux buses, and proper mixing structures. If you want to learn more about that, you can check my other videos on Wwise and audio implementation. So now let's go check on the Unity side of things. So this is my Unity prototype. I just created the scene using assets that I found from the Unity Asset Store and placed them where I wanted them to go and figured out some animation techniques to make it more interactive and alive. As for my 4 states and 2 gameplay modes, I used a simple object of what's called a box collider, which is basically a type of trigger that when the player enters or exits it, certain things can happen. And audio is one thing that you can trigger for these colliders. Now, all the hard stuff was done in Wwise. All I had to do in Unity was place the colliders where I wanted the states to change, mode to apply, and my sound effects to happen. For my sound effects of the creature breathing, it was the same concept, but play and stop when entering and exiting a different collider that overlapped with other ones. This is a very simple way of setting sounds in a specific place, but you can later use Wwise attenuation feature to add distance and 3D spatialization to those sounds. And guys, that is everything that I did to create my prototype for this game. Now let's see it in action. guys enjoyed the video on my process on my first interactive video game prototype. This really shows how amazing smart systems like Unity and Wwise are when it comes to helping the interactive side of a composer's emotional storytelling through their music. If you guys haven't already, again, please go watch my Wwise video so you can see step by step on how these systems work. And if you want to see more, hit subscribe, drop a comment, give a like, and let me know what you would love to see me redesign next. Keep scoring, keep exploring, and as always, happy creating.